welcome to Down the Line TV, Nicole Kriz, one of mine and Betty's best friends. We're so excited to be here with you. How are you doing today?
Doing well, girls. Thanks for having me. I've been very excited about this. I was telling the girls about this morning and the topic of conversation, and they're very excited. Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
A bit of a shout out to those girls. Krizzy, who was that in particular? Can I ask?
Yeah, it was Destiny. We had, you guys know Dee, yeah. Lisa, Renee. We had Alex Osborne this morning.
Awesome.
Just to name a few of them. And Boyana Marinkov was the fourth.
Okay, well, we're pretty lucky. We're getting some good. Now we're getting support. A few shout outs. We're just trying to keep the conversation going, and there's nobody better than to have a conversation with about tennis than you. Nobody analyzes matches more thoroughly, thinks more about tennis. Well, perhaps Boo does, actually. You two take the cake. But Nick, we know that there's so many great things that you're doing. Talk to us a little bit about what's going on with your daily practice. There's been a lot of things that have kind of changed in Tennis Australia, but what does your day look like at the moment with Dee obviously not playing on tour and things like that?
Yeah, so I think Dee's decided to stay home for the rest of the year, and we're kind of transitioning within TA in who we're working with. And, at this point, I think they're going through the selections within the NTA. Based out of Brisbane. So once that kind of gets going, I think they knuckle down with who those athletes are looking like. We'll know a little bit more. I think we're all trying to get to Brisbane in November with some of the UTRs though, which is great. And I think the UTR events have been really great for the girls to be able to continue their competitive matches and get, for those that particularly that are staying here or the ones that went into the US Open in Europe to get some preparation there. So kind of just, periodizing for Dee at this point in time in Sydney, and the college girls who have decided to stay home. Yeah. And it's been fantastic to have those college girls back in. They offer so much, and, to see their development and growth over the last couple of years, it's a, really, really good pathway. So yeah, no, that's pretty much it. Just hanging out for the UTRs in October and ready to hit the ground running in Aussie summer.
Bring it on. Now, Stoney, you know this, I know this, a lot of people know this about Krizzy. Krizzy, you're one of the greatest people ever to create environments on court. You can make that, absolutely. You could make I think a 5-month-old baby engage on a court. But you're brilliant at bringing players together and getting the best out of them. Can you give us some insight into how the hell you do that?
I'm crazy passionate about tennis, and I'm crazy passionate about people. So I think once you combine those two, I think you're going to have a certain energy when you come into the courts. I mean, I can't say enough about your energy, girls. Probably why we all get along very, very well.
To water.
Don't need the coffees in the morning. So I think that's the first part. I think to be excited about what you're doing, and I think the athletes, you start to create a sense of excitement about what you're doing and what we're a part of and kind of what we're working for. And I think the athletes definitely feed off of that. But kind of what we're about to talk about today is once you bring that sense of empowerment to the athletes and you help them with that process and that transition from a junior into a senior, and start to focus on a little bit more of that intrinsic motivation for them. Mm-hmm. And, you have athletes that are driving their own environment, and I've been very lucky to have work with great athletes right from Newington. When Sarah put me at Newington back in the day,
up and said, Nick, I'm going home, you need to take over, let's be real.
That's it. And then through to tennis, when I started in Tennis Australia in 2016, I was very lucky to have great athletes. But, I think getting the best out of them comes from understanding them firstly, understanding where you're trying to take them to. And they understand, they've got a very clear understanding of what that looks like. And then I think the standards, I think that's probably a third, crucial element there, but they got to love what you're doing. And I think I derive a certain amount of enjoyment going through that process and journey with those athletes, because that motivation changes for the athletes definitely coming out of juniors. It's not an easy road, and I think they really question, well, they can question what they're doing from juniors into seniors, and that young adulthood transition isn't easy personally or professionally. And I think I derive a lot of enjoyment, helping them, guiding them through that process. And I think coming into work and loving what you're doing and creating that environment helps, no doubt.
easy is a word you used a couple of times there, and there are players that are not that easy to work with. How do you create a great environment when you're dealing with some players that aren't exactly easy to work with, but you need to work with them to get them to where they need to get to so that the environment doesn't fall apart?
It's a really good question. But I want to skirt around it, and not to underplay it. But I think when you're dealing with athletes that want to be number one in the world or the best in the world, they're not going to be easy. Whether it's a CEO, surgeons, I mean, you know, we're dealing with thresholds here, and what we're asking the athletes, you know, for their job isn't normal. It's not for everyone. So I hope they wouldn't be easy, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. Makes plenty of sense.
And I really respect that within the athletes. I think that's the first thing. And everyone's an individual. You know how, you know, Serena will go about it, Osaka goes about it, Bianca Andreescu goes about it. You know, all of my athletes I'm working with right now, they're all different. But I think the key thing there is once you understand them and have that individual relationship with them and understand how they tick and what ticks, you know, how their brain's ticking over, I think you can start to have a conversation. And the only challenges that I've come across with passionate, I'm not going to say difficult athletes, but passionate athletes and really driven athletes and competitive athletes, is when there's a lack of communication or a communication breakdown. Mm-hmm. And I'll definitely check myself and go, okay, well, are we clear with what we're trying to do out here? And if I'm not getting the results I'm after from the athlete, and when I say results, I mean talking within the training environment, I don't really talk about outcomes. But if the results aren't happening during the, you know, or the process isn't happening or it's breaking down, then, and I can start to see, you know, the athletes fading away from what we're trying to do, it's a conversation and it's a discussion. And I think if you have that there, that relationship there, that definitely helps. So, but that mutual respect has to be there when you're working with the athletes, that's for sure.
Yeah. And Krizzy, I guess both of you, you know, we have perspective again. I bring this up a lot because I feel like it's something we need to keep creating for the players. But one of the things you sort of spoke about there is the communication and not assuming. I feel like we sometimes assume that the players just understand. We don't ask enough of those questions, or maybe we've got someone down the other end that is not a natural communicator. But asking questions, double checking that they're very clear on it is super important. Would you agree with the fact that sometimes you're talking to an athlete and they're nodding their head like this and we just assume that they're probably understanding, but they're not actioning it?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And one of the ways I go about that is obviously you can see if we're talking about a drill and they're not understanding what you're trying to do, or they're going, yep. And they go out and you can kind of go, hang on, this, you know, we've, you know, misunderstood each other here, or I haven't been clear enough, or I haven't asked my athlete, you know, what it is they are, you know, are understanding it. And I think through the drill you can see that, but then I think secondly is you engage your athlete in the conversation, and it's not a coach delivered piece. It's okay, well, you know, what do you want to be working on? Obviously you've got goals for the week, we've got our weekly priorities, but, you know, backed on the 6 month and, you know, the yearly, you know, 3 month, you know, you can't really throw out a year plan or 3 year plan now with COVID, but you certainly have your goals.
Plan in Melbourne. How about a 3 week plan? 19th of October will be released out into the real world.
Absolutely. But I think it comes back to that. And I think if you're asking your athlete, where does this sit into their development, and they've got ownership as well of it, then it's also, you start to open up the door for them driving that conversation and communication. And like you said, you know, certainly some people are more introverted. You know, Dee, talking from my experience with her, she definitely likes it to be a little bit more coach driven, but she has one of the best tennis brains out of anyone that I've worked with. And one of her attributes, she's the fastest learner. And it would be remiss of me if I'm not understanding where she's coming from or what she's seeing, because she's got a totally different perspective. We're two totally different people, and you have to draw out that information from what she's seeing. I think that's, you know, absolutely crucial. And not only that, particularly when you're in a squad environment with someone that has that knowledge and that vision, if you can draw that out of the athlete, you're creating an environment where everyone's learning as well. So I think that's crucial.
Nick, you have an incredibly expansive view. Most coaches are in the coaching environment. They're expanding inside coaching knowledge or webinars and things like that. But your view is so much broader than that. What do you attribute that to, and what do you do to continue to expand beyond just the white lines of a tennis court?
Yeah, again, really good question. I think success in any kind of industry is very, very similar. There's certainly, I think it was Michael Garza actually was saying it. There's trails. Success leaves evidence, right? Leaves evidence, and I don't think it's any different whether you look at the military or surgeons or musicians or sporting. It doesn't matter. There's certain commonalities there, across the board with success, and I've always been a believer of if I can take elements and trying to adapt them, into my world, because tennis isn't just coaching, right? It's not just about the ball on the court. I mean, if it was, it'd be a little bit more simple, and we'd have, we'd all kind of have a different journey. But a lot of what we do is on court, off court, on the road. How much time do we spend with our athletes on the road? And that means you're wearing different hats, and that means you have to understand, different contexts. And if I've got an athlete coming to me going, "Here's my career, can you help guide me there?" I've got massive respect for that. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, I feel like it's my duty, and also part of working for the federation as well, is that you have an absolute duty to understand what that is, what success is, being the best in the world. And not only being the best in the world, but sustaining that level. And I will go to the ends of the world to find out what that is. It doesn't matter what environment that looks like. So I've been, in regards to how do I maintain that, I've been very fortunate to study psychology. I'm doing my undergraduate there, so formal education there with the support from Tennis Australia. But also with, the likes of mentors like Andy Walsh from Red Bull. He's been the high performance director for Red Bull for many, many years, and he's gone out on his own now. But, I've been lucky enough to be on the back of some of those conversations, and, having conversations with you guys, with coaches, with colleagues. It's, you can't buy that either. You can, but, you guys don't charge me for that time. Thank you. But I think that, and I think we're very lucky with, internet these days and the access to some of the resources that we have. It's all there. Yeah. If you want to be looking for it, and if you know what you're looking for,
You're curious, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's why we love talking to you, Krizzy. And we've all known each other since we were kids. And when we talk tennis, we could talk for hours. And I think there's so many different tangents we've gone on in the past. One of the really key moments that I felt defined you, not defined you, I don't like to use that word as such, but I feel it sticks in my mind, is when Dee played Osaka in Brisbane. And it was a really big moment for Dee. I think it was a really massive moment for you as well as a coach. And you were called out on the court. I think it was an on-court coaching moment. And we had WTCA actually play it not long ago. Your advice to Dee. And I think that you're one of the best examples of someone who could deliver a message to a player that they know super well. It was short, it was concise, you made her feel comfortable. Do you feel like, how do you feel about delivering those messages when you go out there? Is that something you pre-planned, or you just knew Dee so well that you knew, bang, it's exactly what she needs to hear? And did she tell you, hey, if you come out, can you just give me like one thing? We just heard from Hlawaty, Sam wanted 3 things. How did you go about that?
It's interesting because I've got a pretty good feel with Dee of when I think she's going to call me out there. Yeah. So I've got a kind of plan in my head. Generally, when I go out on court, I'll definitely ask the athlete what they're feeling, because what I could be seeing might be one thing, but if they're seeing and feeling a totally different thing, what I've got to deliver is absolutely irrelevant. Yeah. So I'll firstly see, and ask what's going on with them, how are they feeling? And then I'll talk about what's tangible. So what's actually happening, what they're in control of, and give them a little plan for the next 2 games. Yeah. And be in depth. And then the last thing I'll leave them with is an immediate, future focus. Right, this is what you're going to do now, so they can action it. Yeah. And I think with Dee, I think we actually did see that in the first couple of points in that game thereafter. It was interesting because I was watching that match. Obviously watching it, I was there.
We hope you're watching.
going, is she going to call me out? Because I could tell that, and Dee's a person that doesn't, she's an incredible competitor, an incredible athlete, and doesn't ever want to come across like, she needs the help, or, she's struggling, or she's got an injury, she's not showing it. And she likes to deal with it herself a lot of the times. She's very independent in that way. And so I'm watching it going, this is a really difficult situation for her. Leading up to that match, it was probably about 15 minutes before the match. I was like, are you going to start breathing yet? Like, she had so much up in her chest. Like, she literally hadn't taken a breath, the poor thing. So I was like, all right, let's start to really bring this back down, and put it in context for you. And so I knew going out what she was going through, mentally and physically. And it probably took her about that time to kind of go, all right, now I'm playing tennis. Obviously, against on that stage against Osaka, you got a few things. Your cognitive capacity is probably a little bit distracted in regards to what you need to do. And I could kind of sense that she knew what she was trying to do, but just wasn't quite there. And like you said, if you heard that on-court component, was she was just coming out of that shot trying to look up too early, and that's the pressure that those athletes put on you.
Yeah.
And I was just trying to center that for her and give her back that control and go, you've got this. Yeah. You've planned for this, you're prepared for this, you have the skills, you can match it. Just refocus here and look to execute and put your ball behind, put your physicality behind it, and let her deal with it as well. And I think that shifted that for her a little bit. So definitely, I think you need a plan. If I had Astra Sharma was helping her out in Charleston and then Cincinnati, and she would always catch me off guard. I had no idea when she was going to call me out. It'd be
magic.
Seriously, scrambling.
Different coaching.
Yeah. Sorry, what was that?
It's different coaching.
100%.
Yeah, she's just a different beast.
Absolutely. And Astra was very much along the lines of, when I asked her what how you feeling, she goes, just tell me what I need to do. I'm like, okay, I can do that too.
Yeah, I'd be like, man, this is it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was like, right. But she would get to the chair. I mean, I'm not, I don't, you guys are a little bit faster than me, but she would get to the chair at the change of ends and then call me out. So I'm like, I'm already behind the 8 ball here.
Right. Astra, I hope you're listening to this.
Just call me out earlier, mate. Just give me a bit more time.
Something well in the cold in Roland Garros, so she's going along well. Nick, with those matches when a player, even a junior, is playing a much higher ranked player than them, same thing with Dee playing against Osaka, what sort of things can we help coaches work with that players get good takeaways from those experiences? What are they looking for?
Yeah, loving the questions, guys. Really good questions. So, and I think starting to work with Dee, it was one of the challenges that I had, because it was that top 100, that field, and that top level WTA was something I had to, learn very, very quickly and understand what that looked like. Because personally, I didn't quite get there. I, saw bits of it as an athlete, more so as a doubles player, but as a singles player, day in, day out, I hadn't really been exposed to that. So, that was a steep learning curve for me, and I had to get my head around that very, very quickly. But I think it's a really good conversation, particularly for juniors when they talk about playing up, right? And you have the juniors that go, I always want to play up. I don't want to play down. I always want to play someone, practice against someone better than me. And as a coach, obviously you understand the element of playing up, playing middle, and then playing down. But I think there's a very good argument there for coaches and parents and for the athlete that you actually need to be exposed to that level as often as you can, to a certain extent. Now, when I say that, that doesn't mean wait or schedule your whole practice around, being exposed and challenging yourself at that level. However, there are elements there that you need to understand and you need to develop, whether that's thinking at that speed. I think that's one of the crucial things. The ball's coming in and it's repetitive, right? Yeah. You're not getting as many errors, and it's just those, particularly under the pressure moments, there's nowhere to go. And unless you're seeing that, you're not exposed to it, and you're not having that become your normal. And that's absolutely crucial. You need to physically be able to repeat at that level, and cognitively, you need to be able to repeat at that level. Yeah. Because as we all know, once your heart rate starts to get up at that level, the brain, the cognitive, that brain fog, that starts to go. You know, you're not seeing it that well, you're starting to become delayed. And you see it as a junior, particularly as, you know, or even like, let's just say, you know, you top 200 playing a girl, you know, under 100, and you might see a result similar to 7.5 or 6.4, 6.2, you know, so it's a closer first set, and you're always trying to get, okay, well, coaching tool is let's get a set off them. Let's get a match off them in, you know, not in 3 sets, in 2 sets next time. And you can see the progression a little bit like that. But for Dee, a lot of what we worked on, and my job as a coach, is trying to expose her to that level within our training, you know, physically and mentally as well. And I think if you can do that within your drills and have that become your standard, and that's what you know. So whether it's, you know, the girls I started with, so they're, you know, 1,200 in the world. All right, we're going to train at a level that's 400. Mm-hmm. So when you hit that, you're already there. When you're playing girls 600, you're already ahead of that. You know, and with Dee, that was an absolutely crucial factor in preparing her for that, preparing her for those moments. So she's not going out there blind. So she's not going out there unprepared, because she could go out there and go, well, hang on, I've got a crowd that I'm not used to playing with, playing at night, haven't seen this, you know, she played Hlawaty before, you know, and she's played a couple of Fed Cup matches, but if that's new to her, her cognitive capacity gets distracted by that. So it's not on the match.
Right.
And against that level, your head needs to be in tennis, totally in tennis. Yeah, that level demands that, you know. So a lot of what we worked on with Dee was understanding where her awareness was going. So preempting her for the distractions that are going to occur as she goes out on court, preempting her for the natural thoughts that are going to happen. I'm playing, I think she was number 3 in the world at that time, playing in front of a crowd, playing in front of, you know, in Australia. You know, I've got people at home watching me, et cetera, et cetera. All those things go through your head. And unless you're knowing how to deal with that, you're going to go out there and you're going to be stuck with that, you know, circling, you know, thought process. So your job as a coach is to preempt that and try and help your athlete become self-aware and understand when those thoughts are becoming, you know, distracting and removing you from your performance. And then once you can start to do that, then redirect them back to tennis. And then within your drills and within their environment and seeing that level more often, they can withstand that level and they can actually get stuck into the match. And we did, like, you know, it did take her probably about, you know, 4 or 5 games to get stuck in, and then she did. You know, and I was talking to you girls about it. It was a 6-month process thereafter before she, you know, and working on all those skills and understanding where your cognitive capacity goes. And we're trying to make that, if that's your cog capacity, to make that about tennis, not crowd, not who you're playing, you know, all those things, and just making that about tennis. And it was, you know, finally when she got to Sabalenka that, you know, she really got her teeth stuck in there, and it was a great match, you know.
So many, like, great messages in that. And I think, like, you know, you had me glued to the screen. I don't think I batted an eyelid just then. I was like, but no,
it's nothing you don't do, Beti.
I feel like I needed to be resuscitated then for a second. But Krizzy, there's just so many, like, amazing messages and things that a lot of coaches don't think about. And I guess, how do we prepare coaches for those experiences? I mean, if they're in their backyard coaching all the time and they're not seeing that level, how do we as a coaching community get more of those experiences for coaches that aren't getting that, aren't receiving that? You know, I don't know if you know the answer, but I'm just sort of putting it out there to really.
Absolutely. Coming from the private sector, and, you know, coming from Newington, and, you know, I had like some like Abby Myers and a couple of the girls coming to me and going, okay, well, all right, you know, would you be able to take me on as well? And it's kind of, you got to go back and understand what the level is and understand, you know, what they're trying to do and where they're trying to get to and what that looks like. I think that's the first thing. And, you know, whether that's, you know, for me, and one of the things I looked at as a coach when I was starting to work with the 12s and 13s and 14s again, was I got online and I you know, started watching the Tarbs matches. I started watching the AO juniors matches. And then I started you know, doing the stats on them to try and understand what was going on within those matches. And then that gave me a feel of what they needed to do. If that's that level, if that's the top level, and again, doesn't matter what I'm going to do, I'm going to go, what's the best level in the world? Whatever it is. Okay, what does it look like? And how can I implement that within my sessions? And I will say this, I'm quite a creative coach. I would say my athletes would definitely say that as well.
Say that.
I would say that within the drills, I'll go, okay, well, what's the outcome I'm trying to elicit? And quite often, a lot of my drills will have a physical component, a cognitive component, and a pressure component.
And a perception component, come on.
Absolutely, and a perception component. And I use the drills as the tool for the coaching, so it's not coach directed necessarily. So you put the athletes in a position where they've got to make choices and decisions. Yeah. And the choices and the decisions and the level of the drill, the skill, whether it's to time, whether it's to location, whether it's the recovery, and then asking them to repeat at that, at that level. Yeah. That's the discussion point, and that's the coaching element. And that's how I use those drills to do a lot of my coaching. So it's not, the conversation is not about, explaining the drill or observational coaching or reactive coaching. It's really good discussions about what they felt and the choices that they made and the decisions that they came up with. And you can see that, by the outcome or the execution, you can see the choices that the athlete made, and you have your drills set up so they reflect world-class standards.
Nick, there's just perler after perler here. We're going to close with a very philosophical bag of lollies kind of question. For the people listening, Nick and I have always discussed the most important parts of definitely my life, sometimes hers, over a bag of lollies. What, as a person and as a coach, how are you different than how you were 3 years ago?
Oh, really good question. I'll just say, look, the depth to probably my person, personally and professionally, I'd say the depth there's it's grown, and I think that comes back down to constantly trying to challenge yourself as a coach and person, constantly trying to grow and learn. I think it's probably just it's a bit of an old adage, but just older and wiser. Yeah, that's pretty much it, and largely due to the people around me. That's for sure.
Hey, Krizzy, I just want to tell you that I don't think I've ever mentioned this to you before, but I will mention it now, is that I have a lot to thank you for, because when I did my high performance coaching course, Krizzy was actually one of my mentors, and I set it up in Sydney. Hey, it's not about how you look on the court, it's about what you're delivering on the court. And I felt like what I achieved from that week was I saw how you created environments, I saw how you had the girls engaged in the squad environment. I personally had never coached much in a squad environment, so it was really good for me to see how you brought players together and got a great outcome for each and every one of them. So I want to say thank you to you genuinely. It's helped me shape and think about my coaching very differently from that point onwards. And I think tennis has a lot to thank you for all the contributions you're making to this country.
Thanks, Boo. Vice versa with you guys. Look what you're doing with this stuff online. It's incredible getting it out there. So great job to you girls as well.
Thanks, Nickers. We love you. Thanks for being here. The whole country loves you. Your players love you. Yeah. It's not just, the way you go about your work is amazing, and just as a friend. So anyone who can get around Nicole Kriz, your life will be forever enriched.
Oh, you guys are too sweet.
Thanks, Krizzy. Thanks for coming on.
Anytime. See you guys.
Bye. Welcome to Down the Line TV, Mark Hlawaty.
Good morning. Thank you. Thanks for having us on.
Are we still morning at the moment, or are we afternoon?
Oh yeah, valid point. Yeah, I don't know. I'm getting my mind where we're expecting a baby on Friday, so it's like I'm preparing my head for the craziness and not knowing what day it is or what time it is. So yeah.
How have you been going at the moment during COVID? What have you been up to?
Well, I'm no handyman. That's highlighted the fact of that. So, and manual labour doesn't agree with me. So it's definitely highlighted those things.
You call me. I love manual labour. I love fixing stuff.
Oh, really? Oh, man. I'm full respect for tradies, that's for sure. But, we've had a few things.
Anyway.
Yeah, with a few things I had to do around the house to get ready for Exhibit A. And so I've got those knocked out and had a bit of planning going on to do for that. And then it's just been a little bit of the calm before the storm, so to speak. And we've just been able to enjoy the time with each other and spend, our mornings, drinking coffee in bed and just getting prepared for what's going to lay ahead. But then wondering, geez, when are we going to get back out on court? When's that going to happen? And that's been a bit of the weird thing.
Mark, can you just give us some insight into your journey? You've been coaching for a very long time. You were the hitting partner to Serena and Venus. Can you give us some insight into how your coaching journey started and what you're currently doing now?
Yeah, I'm one of those tennis players that, due to lack of skill and ability, couldn't make it as a career and then fell into the coaching side. So I was drastically hampered by lack of talent. So that put me off. But I've been coaching for a long time. Even when I was training to play full time, I was helping my coach at the time, Greg Duns, with his coaching business after hours from like 4 to 8 every night. So I'd train all day from 9 till 3 and then help him out. And that was a way to help subsidize my coaching fees for him. So it'll be a little bit of a two-way street. So it started back then, learning about that, but I was like 17 at the time. So I had no idea really. And I ended up going to Perth and I'm coaching in Perth for 12 years and helped a guy there with his coaching side of things, and then helped run a program with the state program and with Len Canal at the State Tennis Centre. And then at age 30, I decided I wanted to hit the road and go and play again, and just see, not to make a living or not to rekindle my number one aspirations, but it's more to see what the world has got to offer, what opportunities are there, and also just fly by the seat of my pants and put myself in some challenging situations, which I did. And I went out and played for another 4 or 5 years before coming back to Melbourne. And so I would play wherever I wanted to play. And if someone said, can you help us with this? Then I'd do that. And I was helping a couple of guys on the road as well and trying to, play doubles with them. And, at that, as both know, at that lower level, money's skint and, you do everything you can. So we were pooling together and you'd be helping 3 or 4 guys and just trying to give them any help that you can.
Mark, talk to us a little bit about some of the female players that you've worked with. Beti mentioned Serena. Obviously, you've spent a considerable amount of time working with Sam over the years.
Yeah.
What are some of the different stories you have from working with female players, some of the things you could share with the coaches, just at that top level that you've been through on the
I kind of probably feel personality-wise, history says I probably have had some good relationships on the female side. I can't put my finger onto it. I feel like I can be a little bit more peer-to-peer instead of like an authority figure talking down. It's not my style. So, and I think from the female side, that whole relationship and that trust is really important, and the honesty. So I think that becomes a really important part of it, and I kind of feel like that's a key element. And I think it is that trust and that relationship building side of it. I think at the elite level, honesty is probably the number one thing, making sure that, you're on the same page. And, and sometimes the message may have to be said in a slightly different way or more tactile way, depending on the personality. Some people like it front and straight between the eyes, and others, it's got to be a little bit more caring. So I think it's understanding that is important. And I think that honesty side of it at that elite level has been across the board. I noticed it probably more so with the young Chinese girl that I work with in China, Julin. It seems to be the Chinese way. It's very black and white. You just say it as it is. Like, she'd say to, I remember a couple of times she said to me, she goes, "Oh, you look fat today." And it's like, oh, okay. Okay, yep, valid.
Not one of them. With
I know. And she just, and that's just the way that they say it, and it's just blunt like that. And once you understand that, and then it's fine. So for her, it was a little bit more that because language was an issue, it was more a pretty direct message, simple but straight to the point. So it didn't necessarily need the kind of emotional safety net that some others may need. It was a little bit more, straight to the point.
Yeah. Mark, and you're a really colourful personality. As coaches seem to feel that they have to have this robotic kind of persona with players. You're much more colourful. You're very approachable, very easy to have a conversation with. Do you find that's well liked amongst players? How do you feel that approach is taken on board with the players?
Yeah, well, it's funny to say, because I kind of felt, I see the same thing. I felt like that was probably a thing that in my eyes I saw as a negative. My view of the coaches, like you mentioned, was very robotic, and it was like all consuming. And if you weren't this serious, hard-faced, worried individual, that when the kids are playing and you're just looking at them and just analysing, you know, every breath that they take and having that concerned look, that's my vision of what I thought those high-performance coaches were all about. And I didn't feel like that was me. And I felt like probably in my eyes, I kind of saw myself from their perspective as a bit of the, not as a serious a coach and maybe more of a good time person and not really as knowledgeable on that side of things. Mm-hmm. But then talking to some of those guys, they were quite like the fact that I could separate the coaching side of it and then normal life. Like for me, it was easy to close the door on the tennis courts and not carry the burden of what happened on that day. And, you know, that player missed a couple of serves or the serve wasn't right. It was easy for me just to separate it. Maybe that's also the way I grew up. I learned better in a less stressful environment. Mm. And I think getting towards a peak, and I guess it's knowing your player as well. Some people like it, you know, to have that real intensity. I couldn't imagine you doing that jovial side with a whole bunch of Ukrainians or Russians. Maybe that doesn't work.
I tried. Didn't work that well.
Yeah, exactly. So it depends on the players. And I guess it's also that relationship is, if you can make it a safe, welcoming environment, especially for the younger age group, they're going to want to come to tennis and they're going to want to play. And then at least, you know, as we know as coaches, you create the environment. That's all we can do, and you let the players go do it. If they're doing it with fear, it doesn't seem to be, you know, although I can't say that. There's been a lot of top players who have had domineering parents that have, you know, who've coached them with fear. But for me, it seems to be that probably a little bit more lighthearted. Not to say that you don't get the work done and you've got to work, but there's also, you know, it's going to be a little bit more light once you're off the court as well, so you're not consumed.
Mark, it's pretty unusual, your path of working with Sam Stosur in about 2004 and then coming back and working with her again.
Yeah.
Sometimes coaches don't get opportunities to work with players at those very drastically different stages of their career.
Yeah.
You know, she was already a very good player in 2004. How is her approach different to when you coached her previously? How did your coaching approach change from when you worked together to over probably 10 years later when you work together again?
Yeah, well, I think with all of us, if you look back at what you did maybe 5 years ago, you would go, geez, did I actually do that? Or what was I thinking? Or what?
So not proud of what I did.
No, but we all, like, you just learn, like, it's like starting school. Like, you know, so from what I knew maybe pre-COVID to what I know now is a lot different, like the stuff that I've been reading and learning. So if I go back to then, you just go, you know, wow, that seems like a lifetime ago. But the thing with Sam is, like, I just admire the way that even in a later stage of her career, she's going, how can I get better? Yeah. If you listen to the white noise of everyone saying, it's time to give up, you're outside the 50, you're outside the 100, what are you doing? You know, you've had a great career, give up. But that's outside noise. And if you don't, you know, obviously she's not listening to that and just going, what can I do better? How can I improve? So you take your hat off to any athlete that is wanting to still challenge themselves in that sense and go, you know what, I want to improve. I want to get some ideas. But I think in her later stage, late last year or middle of last year, she was a lot more aware of where her game is, what her strengths are and what her weaknesses are, and trying to maximize them. You know, she's not going to revolutionize her game. You know, kind of what she's got is what she's got, and it's making the good and the not so good a little bit hidden or a little bit better. But and it's a weird scenario when you're the elder statesman and you've got all these young girls who are there tearing it, you know, ready to go at you, and the game's changed so much with the women's tennis. It's amazing. So
and Mark, with Sam, or any other player that you've worked with of that level, how do you go about the process of goal setting? Obviously, you know, players of Sam's level are really experienced. They know what they want.
Yeah, I think she was definitely pretty set on what she wanted to do. And, you know, and when we started talking, I was asking her about, you know, the areas that she feels she can get some improvements, and she could just rattle them off and just go bang, 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 bang. So she knew, and that's different to, I guess, a young girl who's starting at that journey, who's kind of just opening up the doors of the, you know, the tour life and going, whoa, what is this? Probably that person needs a lot more guidance. And I guess like what you're talking about, Beti, a bit more of a holistic approach about working out what that journey is going to look like and the areas that you need to get better at to get the end result. Yeah. Whereas Sam was, you know, pretty set in the areas that she wanted to get better on the court and the way she'd liked to get messages given to her and the way messages set. So she was pretty set. She obviously knows, you know, being out there long enough, what works for her, and you just run with that. But some of these younger girls, you know, it's, you got to, you know, they may have a goal of, you know, a ranking goal, but to get there, you've got to improve, like in so many slices of the pie, there's so many things.
Yeah.
And if you don't do one, you can't do the other.
Mark, can you speak a little bit more to that? Sam specifically knew how she wanted messages delivered to her. A lot of young players don't know that. And there's this feeling out with even young pro players who are on tour aren't quite sure of that. How did she articulate that to you? And how do you go about that with players who have absolutely no awareness of what that messaging should look like and potentially just hold it in rather than say, hey, Mark, it's not working?
Yeah. And that's a tough one because you don't want to hurt feelings, you know, on both sides. Like, you know, I know if I get frustrated, and I actually said that to Sally the other day, I get frustrated and you hear your partner say, hey, calm down. You know what, that's the last thing you want to hear. Like, so it's understanding the situation, and especially at the pro level, because if you get called out on court, you've got that 30 to 90 seconds.
Yeah, you better get it right.
Yeah. And sometimes your message may mean nothing, but you know, even if you give gold, it may not get through the barrier depending. And that, I guess that's also a little bit about the personality of the player being able to notice that, you know, it isn't potentially at that moment when you're giving information, it's about a team and it's about being open to that information and not being too emotionally too far gone. If you're too far gone, then it's done and potentially done and dusted. Whereas Sam was like, you know, I just need you to go 1, 2, 3 things and then go back to the most important one, rehash that one, that's it, go. So it wasn't so much about, you know, too much information overload. So, you know, sometimes it's more about, it's okay, back yourself, you're going to be okay, stay calm, you know, you keep doing it. You may have lost that set, but what you're doing is great. Keep at it, stick to your plan, you'll get your moment in time. But it's a really tough one. But I think it's important that those, especially for a younger player and the coach working with a younger player, is to find out really and maybe test the boundaries on when you are going to give some information, you know, and when do you just pull away and hold back and just go, you know, might be a good opportunity. And I remember watching a video with Darren Cahill when he was saying to Simona Halep, it's up to you to work it out.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes less, sometimes is more in that situation. And they may fail and they may lose, but they're probably going to lose or fail anyhow. So, and if you, I would be happy to have that loss now, and then you get 10 wins because of it down the track, because the lesson has been learnt and the learning's been had. And if they flunk it and fail, then that's okay.
Yeah, and there's 2 really important things you've touched on there, Mark, is, you know, perspective is so important for player and coach. And sometimes those lines are really blurred because, you know, you're seeing the long-term development of maybe a young, improving player.
Yeah.
But seeing results.
Yeah.
It's really hard to drill that into them, isn't it? Like, okay, I'm looking at you. How are you going to play in 5 years' time? How are you going to play in 3 years' time? It's having that patience and perspective, which I think's always challenging. And the other one that you touched on, I think it's great that Sam is coming forward and communicating. This is
I process information best on the change of events. I think we need to give more autonomy to players and trust the ability that they have to come to us and say, this is how this is what I think works best for me. Give them that opportunity to talk to us about that instead of us constantly just delivering messages.
Yeah, and I think we as coaches probably in the past, and I've been guilty too often I can remember, where you want to do everything for them. And so they don't have to worry about that and think about that. They can just concentrate on tennis. Well, sometimes that's where your best learnings are. Like, if you're not going to be able to calm your emotional state on the tennis court if you go to the shops and someone jumps in front of you in line and you're going ape at them and getting really angry. You may only spend 10% of your day on the tennis court. So there's lots of learnings you can do off the court and problem solving you can do off the court to then help you once you get on the court. So if your responses are going to be okay off the court, they're going to mesh well when you get on the court and that problem solving. And I remember, we had one young kid that I used to look after, and loving parents, but the parents did everything, and a part of the failing was, just let them go out and try to do these things, and I had to get this kid to call up the tournament to find out about booking a tennis court, and I gave the information sheet to him, and ended up in tears because he couldn't work out how to find the number and what to ask. And it was like, you just do it. But it didn't end up, didn't end up practicing the next day because the phone call wasn't made. But we went down to the courts and then, and the same thing, it was like, I can do it for you, but I'm not going to do it for you. This is yours. You own it. Find out how you can do this. And for us, when you think about it, just ringing up and booking a court, it's so simple. But we don't know where kids' journeys have been and what's been and what hasn't been done for them and how they can cope in those situations. And after that, it was fine. And you look back at 2 days and say, you were tearing up over a phone call. Like perspective. It's only a phone call. And I'm sure you've done it. When we take young kids on tour, you get them to hit with foreigners and other kids, and watching the young kids knowing that they've got to find practice partners from other countries, walking around the tennis venues like sharks looking for a prey, trying to find a foreigner to go and ask. And, I love watching that because you see the interaction and you see how nervous they are to talk to another kid who's from a different country. But once they break down that barrier, they've almost got a friend for the tour and they've got a practice partner. And that's stage one of learning what life is like if you're going to go play it on the tour and on the road.
Yeah, we've had that, haven't we, where a kid, I've had that before, where a kid's walked past 10 Japanese players and said, I couldn't find anyone to play with.
Yeah, exactly. I love,
it's one of their friends. Wasn't comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny. And, I love those situations, and you just watch the kids, and some of them are bold and that they just go straight in and it's fine. And others, it's like, it's really uncomfortable. But once they get over that, and, we're all human, we're just like anyone else. And, once they know how to communicate in tennis language, so to speak. So once it's done, it's great. And you've just helped that kid. It may nothing to do with forehands and backhands, but that's part of the learnings of being a tennis player. You've just ticked one of those, those lessons off.
Yeah. Hey, Mark, there's one woman who knows how to deal with difficult circumstances and overcome a lot of pressure. Serena Williams, you spent a lot of time with her, and I do believe you guys are good friends, have still a great relationship. When this goes live to air, the French Open is going to be over. We want to close out with telling us, does Serena have 24 in the bag? And if not, yes, maybe. You get 24. You're under the pump.
Yeah, that's. I'd love her to have 24 for sure. A lot of things have got to fall in place for that to happen. I think if she makes another semi or a final, then to me that's almost as good enough, so to speak. But yeah, it's getting harder for her. I think if you look at just competing, playing, age, all those factors, and she's had some situations where she's had some opportunities to take that record, and is that too much external pressure on her at the moment? Maybe so. hindsight will be a beautiful thing. But yeah, I don't, unfortunately, I'd love to see you do it, but I just see there's a few others there that are just at a slightly different level and are brave enough and, you know, and back themselves probably just as much as what Serena does now to challenge her when it comes to a title or even a semi. So yeah, heart says yes, but the logic say unfortunately no. But wow, you know, 23 Grand Slams. Geez, is that going to be repeated? Is that
It might be AO. That might be the big one. It was the last one. I know you'll be there. We'll be out of lockdown, and let's see. Hopefully, we have a big Aussie summer because we've had not much of an Aussie year of any sort.
Yeah, it's been brutal, huh? We're all just champing at the bit, and I think the great thing is, this time the coaches have just been filling their skulls with knowledge and information. So we're going to get out there and we're just going to be going absolutely bonkers. And I feel for the kids because they're going to get you know, so much information. And I just, yeah, hope that, you know, everyone's done okay during this period of time. And like what you girls are doing is great, and spreading the word and spreading the love. It's a great time for, you know, us not to be so insular and to be a lot more open and go, you know what, we can all learn from each other. And if we didn't have computers, you know, we'd go and have a meal together and shoot the shit with each other and find out stuff and learn from each other. So I think more of this needs to be done. So, you know, this platform is awesome. And especially now, more importantly, is getting more girls out there on the court and staying on court for longer periods of time and going, there are career options along the way. I just don't have to be a tennis player. I can be so much more. So either with education, coaching, you know, sports physio, whatever, there's so many more opportunities. So who knows, maybe this pram's going to get filled up with a little girl that, that break through the ceiling and yeah, who knows.
Little Hlawaty, that would be fun.
Oh, crazy, geez.
Oh, it'll be fun. Thank you so much for joining us. It's always great to see you and learn from you, and we really appreciate your time.
Hey, pleasure, and any time, and keep the great work going. Love it. Thank you.